What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Joe Hatagwa. You're watching the Authentic African platform. And if you want to know what I really feel about living in Africa, then this is the video for you. All right. We are live. We're live. We're live on all platforms as usual. We're live on Instagram. We're live on Twitch. We're live on TikTok. We're live on Twitter or X. We are live on Facebook, and we are live on Instagram, if I haven't already mentioned that. A couple of Instagram channels, a couple of YouTube channels. We're live everywhere. We're about to go live on TikTok, too. I actually forgot to set up TikTok, so we're about to go live on TikTok. So today we're going to talk about how I really feel about living in Africa, what I think about the continent, my conversations, my discussions, my feelings, and just where things are as they stand today. I have a lot of thoughts, and I just watched a couple of videos today that just reminded me of some of the things that I wanted to talk to you all about. People I think tune into this to try to get a realistic understanding of what it's like to live on the continent. As someone who spent over 35 years of my life living in the United States, and then now spending the last 4+ years of my life living on the continent, I can tell you that there's been some good, there's been some bad, and there's been some ugly. And I really do want to make sure that if you're looking to make that decision to move, to visit, to invest, that you have all the available knowledge that you can get. I'm just one piece of that puzzle. Obviously, you will be able to get more of that from other people as you do your research. As much as I can, I'm here to try to help you out to make that decision, right? If you're trying to make that decision. All right, so before we get into those details, first things first, can you hear me? I did a lot of talking just now, and I wasn't even sure you can hear me. Can you hear me? And if you can hear me, where are you watching from? Let me know where you're watching from, and let me know if you can hear me. So first of all, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. And then also tell me where you guys are watching from. Now, if you guys might know, I'm not able to go live on the Authentic African YouTube channel anymore, at least at the very moment. It's a limited accessibility or capability. Capabilities. So I'm going live on my personal Instagram page, and I'm also going live across many other channels and platforms for the Authentic African platform. But do let me know if you guys can hear me. Give me a thumbs up. And then also, if you can, okay, so Donalda says you can hear me. Great. And I see a bunch of people here that we haven't gotten a chance to meet yet. So Appointed Tess, shout out to Appointed Tess, watching from North Carolina. Donalda, I know you're watching from Freetown, Sierra Leone, if I'm not mistaken, King Tum, if I remember correctly. That is my photographic memory trying to express itself there. But yeah, okay, cool. So you guys can hear me on Instagram. And T-H-A-T-O, Tato, said you can hear me, or is it Tato? Says you can hear me. Nice. Where are you watching from? And then we also have Anne-Marie Hardy, you can hear me, and you're watching from London. Nice. Okay, so let's just get right into it. I mean, most of you guys are aware of me, especially those of you who follow my personal Instagram page. It's unlike the Authentic African Instagram page where most people aren't really aware of who you're watching, but I also just do a quick intro for those of you who are unaware. So again, I mentioned that I lived on the continent for almost 4 years. I am an American-born Sierra Leonean, someone of Sierra Leonean descent, but born in the United States. I am a dual citizen between the United States and Sierra Leone, have been since 2019. Been eligible for a lot longer, but didn't know about it till 2019, and I had arrived here and got it done. I grew up in New York and Pennsylvania, mostly Pennsylvania, because I went to boarding school in Pennsylvania for underprivileged children. That's a conversation for another time. And so most of my experience, honestly, growing up, had been trying to get away from my Africanness. You know, if anybody knows what it's like to have grown up in the 80s and 90s, there were very few people that embraced being outside of American culture. So You know, in Sierra Leone, we speak a Creole, which is like a pidgin English, some people would describe it as. And, you know, we would shun and shy away from it if we heard our mother speaking it in public, right? It was always like, or if she would call me by my middle name, my family name, Bemba, I used to get like nervous about it because people made fun of it, Bambi, Simba, you know, there's a number of different ways that you could cut that into different ways that you can make fun of kids. And if you think about your life as a teenager or preteen, your life revolves around what's happening around you. And as much as adults will try to tell you that stuff doesn't matter in the long run, it matters to you because that's your entire life. And so I spent that time really trying to get away from my Africanness, you know, as much as I could, you know, and I think it did a disservice, to be honest with you, because I didn't circle back to it until much later in life. But what I found was because I didn't outwardly present as West African or Sierra Leonean, just Black to a Black American, mostly what people would describe as someone who talked white. Most people would speak about Africa and Africans as if I was a person who had family members that had just recently arrived, right? And then on the other end, I had heard people in circles that I had been around on the African side talking about Black Americans. And what I found was there was very little knowledge and understanding of what the other side was going through and the other side's history, and how we all benefit from the positive things that both sides have done, and also how we all are negatively impacted by other elements that are happening today. And so, you know, although it was not at all a focus of mine growing up to try to bridge that gap, at some point I found myself doing that from time to time in certain conversations. And then eventually it just became something that I became passionate about. And that's what this whole platform is about, right? The idea of Authentic African, even though it's called Authentic African, the idea is that we're all of African descent, right? We are all authentically of African descent. And the goal is for us to learn more about each other so that we can have a collective movement to push ourselves forward. Pan-Africanism is something that I've been, you know, much more in embracing over the last, you know, 2 years, 3 years, and understanding a lot more and aligning myself with and talking to people more and just educating myself more on and why it is that I have this platform. Now, one of the frustrating things about having this platform and living where I live on the continent is my internet connectivity. So from time to time, I may be a little bit choppy. Internet may go in and out. So forgive that. It just is what it is. It's the nature of where I am. So I am in Freetown, Sierra Leone after living in Ghana for 2 years. I decided to move to Sierra Leone because I wanted to focus more on being able to build content around this country and also build a stronger, broader network, because this is culturally my second culture, right? I mean, I am a Black American generally by culture just because of how I speak, how I grew up, the music I spent most of my time listening to, and the history that I have. But I am also culturally Sierra Leone as a secondary element to who I am that is developing more and more every day. And so, you know, but Sierra Leone is more of close to my culture than what Ghana was. Ghana was a great place to learn, to see where Sierra Leone can get to and even advance beyond eventually. But it was important for me to come to Sierra Leone to really be able to build a future with people who are culturally a part of the culture that I'm a part of, and tribes that I am a part of as well, and family members and all other things as well. And they need, I think, and I won't say they need, but there are many people in Ghana that do what I do. There aren't as many people in Sierra Leone that do what I do. And I'm not just talking about content creation, but I'm talking about the idea of bridging the gap between these two groups. They're very competent, well-intentioned, large platforms in Ghana already, and people of Ghanaian descent doing that. So I don't need to be another voice in that space. I think I need to be another voice amplifying what's going on here. So that was a long intro, almost 9 minutes long, but I hope that's helpful to everyone to understand how we got to this point, right? Now, let's get to what it's been like living here. You know, I've had many different lives where I've talked about, I've gone live many different times where I've talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly, the pluses, the minuses, whatever. And I think not everybody has heard all of those conversations. So I think I want to just do broad overview of what my experience has been like thus far. And I'll talk about it in a couple different areas. One, we'll talk about socially. Two, we'll talk about in terms of, career. And then three, I think what I want to talk about outside of social and career, I want to talk about in the world of entrepreneurship, because career is a little bit different from entrepreneurship. And I want to explain to you what it's been like through my journey to maybe help you all if you guys are planning to move to the continent and you're making any decisions. The first thing that I will say is I always tell people, and the reason why I tell people this, by the way, is because I did not do this. Okay. And I learned later this was important. But I always tell people to visit multiple times and ensure you have an income stream that is everlasting, right? That will continue no matter where you live. I had income streams coming. I had promised income streams. I had ideas about income streams. And I didn't have a total idea of how much I was going to need to live off of in order to live on the continent of Africa in perpetuity. So I guess for the rest of my life, I don't know if I'm using the word correctly or incorrectly. But my point is, I decided to move here more on a whim. You know, I'd gotten some advice from some people, and they did make a lot of sense. But that advice applied more for people who had the background that they had. And what do I mean by that? So again, I moved here doing some consulting in the United States, right? I was doing some consulting with advertising technology companies based in the US and based on the continent of Africa. And I knew that they were generating some income. I had gotten some contracts here and there. So I knew that more contracts were coming. At least I assumed or thought more contracts were coming because I was promised more contracts were coming from different companies. I also moved here because a peer mentor of mine had moved here and really done a great job of figuring out how to accelerate his career. He had been working at an investment banking firm. He moved to Nigeria, basically saying, I'm only going to stay working for you if you move me to Nigeria. Flourished in Nigeria, moved to South Africa, started a startup, and raised millions of dollars for his startup. Now, he had a system in place that got him to that point. He had been living in Nigeria for a few years. He had built a huge network, and he had been making more money than most people in Nigeria while living in Nigeria, by the way. So he was doing relatively well financially, which is an important element to this because it helped to make everything else a little bit easier. And so when he was transitioning into his career as an entrepreneur, he had the knowledge, he had the network, and he also had the finances to be able to step back and maybe take a little bit of a lesser of a salary in his own business to be able to sustain a lifestyle that is worth living. I, on the other hand, moved here with a couple of consulting gigs and with the expectation that with my background, I'd be easily able to get a job. And I did actually get a job because of him in 3 months. Because of that peer mentor, I got a job within 3 months that was paying $40,000 a year. Now, taxes in Ghana are more than taxes in the United States. And so it was pretty expensive. So I made less in that job than I had made in any other job in my entire career, including my first job out of college. My first job out of college paid $45,000 per year. So just, take that in consideration. At that point, I'm 37 years old, 36, 37 years old. I'm taking a job for $40,000. So I'm working to learn, not to earn. But understanding that my lowest paying job prior to that was when I was 22 years old, right? Yes. So just to put that all into perspective, right? I think that just gives you some perspective. And I was the head of a division at a multinational publicly traded company. This company operates in 11 countries in Africa, including Kenya, Tunisia, Nigeria, Ghana, I was the head of advertising for Ghana. They're in South Africa. There are many different countries on the continent. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head at this moment. And they're publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And I bought shares in that company and encouraged other people around me to do so as well, because they call themselves the Amazon of Africa. Now, I learned a lot, absolutely learned a lot, built a great network and relationship. Okay, if you guys can hear me, give me a thumbs up. It looks like I'm back, but it's hanging on a thread here. My connection's hanging on a thread. All right, it looks like the connection's back. Can you guys hear me? I think I lost a bunch of people through that connection getting lost. But let me know if you guys can hear me. Give me a thumbs up so I know you guys can hear me. We got some people on YouTube. We got people on Twitter. We got some people on Facebook. All right, Mark Hansen says you can hear me. All right, so before I move on, Mark Hansen says, how do I contact you about setting up a visit to Sierra Leone in December or January? The link I saw from you before didn't work. Yes, so many people were saying the link didn't work. I changed cards, and Calendly was not charging the right card anymore. So I had to change. I just set that up today. Try the link again. I'm going to put the link here in the chat. So those of you who want to set up a consultation can do so. Give me a second to find the link. I just had it open on another browser. Is it open on this browser here? As you can see, I have many browsers open. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and attempt to do it again, and you will be able to set up an appointment. I know, Tiggy, you were trying to set one up as well. It looks like you were able to set one up separately. Not sure how you were able to do it, but it looked like it went through for you. But I'll have a link here in just about 10 seconds. I just needed to get it from the page. So here it is. So there it is there. Copy and paste that, save it for later in the chat. You guys can click on that and set up a consulting call with me. So now back to the conversation. So I took this job. The job was great. I mean, in terms of the learning experience, I learned a lot. And what I learned most was a lot of the major issues you find in the US apply here. But there are more and different challenges working at a company on the continent of Africa, especially a large multinational company like that. Many times leadership is remote, and not just remote from a geographic standpoint, but remote in terms of a cultural understanding. I went to go work as the head of advertising in Ghana. I am not Ghanaian. I do not speak Twi. And I don't even speak their pidgin. So there are many barriers there. You got to develop relationships when you're in sales, right? It takes time to develop relationships when you're a new salesperson. And on top of that, I had to show them that I'm not just some arrogant American here to try to take their money. I'm really trying to collaborate with these brands to help them advertise their brands on this platform, which was Jumia at the time. And that was very, very challenging. I was threatened with a performance improvement plan from the powers that be, who had no idea what was going on in country. I had to take on 19 individualized meetings per week with different employees in order to maximize output, which they had no idea about. And when I expressed it to them, they didn't understand, because they just weren't there culturally. They just didn't get it. And so that was like my first big learning lesson was, you can work for a large multinational, publicly traded, and it looks great on the outside, but on the inside, it's not as great. And that was a really big learning experience for me. And it was also a learning experience for me about how little people get paid and how much work they're expected to do living on the continent, and why so many people weren't willing to do just the basics of their day job, because they just felt like it's not worth it to me to do all this work. I'm not getting paid enough. And that's a conversation for another time. And you can You can debate whether or not you think that that's an okay way to approach it, but nonetheless, that's just how it was. And so that experience for me was probably the most eye-opening and the best experience that I could have. I was frustrated every day. I was angered at many times. You guys might remember the one few times that I've ever cursed on a video. I did a video about why I quit my job in Africa. So if you want to go back and watch that, you can watch that. It breaks down exactly what happened at that point in time. And it was an eye-opening experience. And it was very important for me to have gone through that experience in my career. Again, financially, it was interesting, right? Because I took a job that paid much less, but I did that knowingly and willingly, because I knew that it was more about learning. I was working to learn, not to earn in that instance. However, what I did not take into consideration was, once you get here, you find so many opportunities to be entrepreneurial. Everybody has a side hustle who has a day job because the day jobs don't pay well enough to pay all your bills. Everyone has a side hustle. Side hustles generally cost money, right? In the United States, there are a lot of side hustles you can do that that can come baked into whatever it is that you do. So, for example, if you want to start an e-commerce website, you can pay like $45 a month, and your internet service provider is already paid for just to have internet. So now you just pay for this e-commerce site. For me and some of the things I had to do, I had to pay more for internet services than I normally was paying before. It incurred new costs to start this business that I was trying to start that had very little overhead, right? Also, when you are here, a lot of times you pay rent a year in advance. So it's not a monthly bill coming out of your pocket, but it is a large, chunky payment that you have to pay up front. I was living in an apartment that was $600 a month on a $40,000 a year salary, which, after you cut off half of that for taxes, basically, right? It's not half, but I mean, after taxes, I think I was about at 29,000 or so, 28,000 on that $40,000 salary, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, just cut off about 11, 12,000 off of it, whatever the salary was. And so, and now I'm paying $600 a month for rent. And that was me thinking I'm being enterprising. I'll be able to rent the apartment when I'm not there, but then ran into many other issues. The generator was never turned on, or it didn't work. I had issues with water from time to time. And so obviously if I had an Airbnb guest there, they were likely to give me a 1-star review, which defeats the whole purpose of having an Airbnb guest. So now I'm paying $600 a month for this big apartment, 3 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, but I cannot generate any revenue from it. And these are all lessons that I learned, which now I pass on to other people with these consulting calls, right? Some of the best venture capital firms are full of folks who had businesses that failed because they can tell you what not to do. There are a lot of people who can tell you what to do, but it's also good to know what not to do. And so for me, I can tell you what not to do and what I've learned and what I've been able to be successful with and what I've failed at as well. And I have no problem telling you that. So that's on the career front. I will also say one of the other things that I really learned the hard way was there still is a little bit of an American arrogance. And it's funny because I talk to friends about this and they'll say things like, of course, it's easy to get a job in Africa. Like, does their education even compare to yours? And that is a really, really arrogant way to look at it. Because first of all, if you really think about it, America's rank in math and reading is in the 20s, if not 30s and 40s, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of out of 200 countries. I know we're not top 10 in either. But you know who is? And even if they're not top 10, the baseline for many is higher. How about Nigeria? Right? When you talk to people who have a better command of the English language than I do, it makes you think that, you know what? That stupid arrogance I had coming from the United States, thinking I can just get a job anywhere and that I have a better education or I know more, throw that out the window. Because although I have an interesting background and a different background, and it allows me to have different experience, it doesn't necessarily make it better. Because I also don't all have the local context that they have, that other people have. And that's why, depending on your skill set and what you want to do, you'll have a lot harder of a time getting a job in West Africa than you think you might. That's a really important thing that I think a lot of people overlook and not many people talk about. And I'm a perfect example of that. I'm somebody who moved to the continent of Africa with a 15-year career already. 16 years? Maybe 16 years. And I had moved up. I had moved on to move up. So every new job I went to, was a new position that was a equal pay, but at least or higher pay, or at least a title up. And so I got all the way up to vice president title from a company that I worked for in 2022. And I think that there was a sense of arrogance, one from the people around me, like, of course you can get that job easy. People would send me country manager roles, right? Where it would clearly say in the job description, you need to have 3 years of country manager experience to work in this job. And I would just think that, like, who around you is going to be better than me in this country manager role? And how dumb did I look when I see who they hire and that person has a wealth of knowledge that I don't have? And it was humbling, and it was important to get that lesson. And it's important that I tell you all this, because many of you who are planning to come to the continent are going to be thinking the same way, and you're going to have people around you saying similar type of things, and they're going to all be wrong. Very wrong. So I want you to get that out of your head. Number one. Now, if you work in the NGO space, that is a position in a space where, as long as you have a master's degree and you've had experience at US-based companies in that space, it will be a lot easier to get roles here on the continent, because there are so many openings at NGOs and there's so much money flooding into NGOs. When we're talking, and that's non-governmental organizations, those are generally like nonprofits, but they partner with government to build different things. Like some NGOs do emergency rescue services like 911, or some NGOs working with doctors and local healthcare clinics to bring them together and bring in some education, knowledge, experience, etc. There are a lot of those who have plenty of money. If you're working in the for-profit space and you're working in a world where the organization that you work at needs to generate a significant amount of money in order for you to get paid what you're used to getting paid, you need to rethink things. Because, I came from companies that would do, the smallest company I ever worked at, I think, was doing $50 million a year in revenue, if I'm not mistaken. The smallest company I ever worked at. The largest company I ever worked at, which was Hulu, now Disney, but like when it was just Hulu by itself, it did $6 billion the year that I was leaving. $6 billion that year. I don't know if I can say a large percentage of that was off of just subscriptions, and another large percent of that was off of advertising revenue. And so they could pay accordingly, right? So all the people who worked there were paid pretty well accordingly. Some complained about their pay, but trust me, they got paid pretty well, especially considering what I've seen other people get paid. So I come here, and for example, at Jumia, they're publicly traded, so I think most of the numbers are public. I don't know if the specific country numbers are public, but in terms of like one specific year, maybe I can speak about that. The revenue, well, first of all, it wasn't profitable, right? So it wasn't profitable. Their expenses outweighed the revenue, but the revenue generated didn't even reach was it 200,000? Was it $500,000? Maybe $500,000, I think, for the year. I think it was $500,000 for the year was the revenue for the complete revenue for that year. And I actually may be generous. I just don't want to undershoot the number. Let's say it was $500,000 a year. But remember, the smallest company I've ever worked for in the United States was doing $50 million a year. So you're talking about $500,000 versus $50 million. So obviously they can't pay me what those kinds of companies in the States were paying, right? So for those of you who are thinking about coming here, right, and you're thinking like, look at all that tech investment on the continent. I see Facebook's there, and Twitter was here, X was here. You see Google here. Many of them pay based on the cost of living here. There are very few roles that you are more qualified than someone who has the same number of years of experience, but with the local context, that you can get a job over them. All right, so there's a couple people that I want to acknowledge. Dan Diablo's in the building. Shout out to Dan Diablo. Tim Black says, I've heard Africa will humble you. It sure will. Africa will humble you in many ways, and we'll talk about more ways. Liz Z says, I wouldn't even look for a job coming in unless being transferred by a multinational company. And by the way, you'll get a wage adjustment a lot of times if you do that. There's someone who follows the page and follows the platform, and she worked for Deloitte. I think it was Deloitte. Let's say one of the big consulting firms, right? And when she talked to them about transferring to Ghana, they were going to do a cost of living adjustment to her salary, and it was going to drop it dramatically. And she just felt it wasn't worth it. So she decided she wasn't even going to continue to pursue a career with that company here on the continent. So we got Ya in the building. Yo, Joe. What's up, Ya? YOA. So I think it's really, really important to understand those things. And I'm really passionate about this. Like, I talk about it with such passion because I had to learn the hard way, and there's no better way than to learn through your own experience. But wisdom is learning from other people's mistakes. And so if you guys can learn from my mistakes, learn from my mistakes. And it doesn't mean that everyone else will have some of the same challenges that I've had, but at least you know that they can come up. And, I have no problem talking about my challenges, right? I have some challenges, with reading comprehension, but most people don't know that if you're working with me in a work context. So, many people that I worked around did not have those challenges, right? And so sometimes you have to find ways to get around whatever challenges you have. And it can be a little bit more difficult when you're transporting yourself and transplanting yourself into a new country. So whatever your personal setbacks are, they can get exacerbated by moving to a new space, a new country, a new culture. All right. Because I will tell you, I was many times, sitting in a room having a conversation with people, and I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about because they put it in the email and the email was too long, and I thought I was going to walk into the meeting and they were just going to explain it to me. But there were no people mansplaining stuff to me. So I didn't have anybody to re-explain the thing that was in the email beforehand. And so I walked to a meeting unprepared, underprepared. And that's very rare for me. And so some of these things is what happened from time to time. And, so I had to learn ways to kind of get around that. And, I have my own tricks to the trade, which we can talk about at a later time. But, with my reading comprehension issues, there are things that I have to do to ensure I get everything. I mean, I'm a visual learner, so, sometimes I make people draw it out on the board, or I'm an auditory learner too. So if you can explain it to me, I'll get it. But in general, if I'm reading it, I just have a hard time reading. And that actually has nothing to do with my IQ or my ability to understand things more broadly. It just is how I learn. And unfortunately, most people do not accommodate for how I learn in terms of their way of communicating in the business world, right? And so I had to find ways to make it make sense for me. Anyway, moving on. So there was a couple of questions. I want to get to them. So Mark Hansen says, what's entrepreneurial space look like for infrastructure business like trucking, transportation, and or home construction? These are very important businesses no matter where you are on the continent. There's going to be more competition in some places versus others. That's just what it is. So one of the things that I will tell you, just, free advice, is in any business that you do, that you come here with any forms of transportation or any forms of equipment, there are two things to keep in mind. If you're coming with trucks, make sure you have a way to cheaply send parts in and out, and a trusted mechanic to work on, work on your vehicle to make sure that you maintain your maintenance on your vehicle, because that is going to be the biggest challenge you have, especially driving long distances. And there aren't going to be premium unleaded fuel that you can get here like you do in the United States. So whatever fuel you're putting into your vehicle, especially in a country like Sierra Leone, is going to have a detrimental effect. It's basically like eating McDonald's every day. You know, that's what your car is going through. So keep that in mind, right? So, you know, your cars are going to be going through some stuff. So you're going to have to replace things more often. You're going to have to make some adjustments. You're going to have to account for those costs. Now, certain countries are better off than others as it pertains to this, right? You know, but if just those are some of the things you need to think about. And depending on where you are, we can have that specific conversation, Mark, if you want to set up a consultation. So that's the trucking and transportation. Now, on the home construction side, I think home construction is a great business to get into because smart people here are buying and building. However, the materials needed to buy and build take a lot of manpower. If you're smart, you have two businesses in construction. You yourself offer the service to people who want to build, and then you offer products to people who are also building for other people. What I mean by that is this: if you can find a way to make blocks, an automated way to make blocks, if you can have generators on standby, portable generators that people can utilize, these things are things that you can rent out to other people who are building houses so that you're not reliant on having to close a new customer every 6 months as you finish developing this new project or that new project. You have multiple streams of income for that one business that you have. That's a free piece of advice. Take it or leave it. But that's what I would tell you on that. But yes, there's plenty of opportunity in that space, both of those spaces. You just need to know what to do to ensure that you reduce the amount of headaches once you get into those spaces. Okay, Yah says, so important, Liz Z. I wish I heard this earlier, but there is a saying, you do not come to Africa to get a job, you come to Africa to create a job. That's right. That's what most people fail to realize. And Yah is speaking from someone who spent a lot of time traveling around the continent, a lot of time in Tanzania and in Ghana. In fact, her and I met in Ghana. Mark Hansen said, I think home construction is hotcake right now. Might be a frustrating process, but there is huge demand. So yeah, so I agree with Yah on this one. Home construction is huge. Let's see. You guys are just responding to each other, so I'll let you guys read that. Okay, Lizzie said, true, first thing folks like to do upon returning is build. Yes, exactly. Tim Black says, hit that like button, everybody. Exactly. Yes, everybody, hit that like button. And you know what? I have been neglecting the IG, folks. Sorry about that. Is anybody saying anything on IG? Vixa Pick says, so glad I tuned in. This is an interesting topic. Hey, Joe. What's up, Vic? What's going on? Daniel Landsman. What's up? Mr. Landsman is here. And Asia Photo is asking if that's Daniel Landsman from Smato. So Daniel Landsman and Chester, former colleagues of mine, are tuning in. What's up, guys? On IG. I forgot I went live on my personal page. So those of you who follow my personal page are going to see this live. So that makes sense. So former colleagues of mine. Chester, we should catch up soon. The same thing with you, Daniel. Daniel, we definitely got to catch up. I got to give you some insights and some things that are going on. We'll probably be catching up in person a lot sooner than anticipated. Here's an interesting thought. Okay, so Maurice Jones says your driver has to also be a mechanic. Correct. Yes. If you are going to get into the trucking business and you're not going to drive it yourself, or if you're going to drive it yourself, there's no AAA or whatever it's called. You know, I never drove. I was always Ubering or public transportation prior to that. But yeah, so there's no AAA. There's no roadside assistance. You need a person who has the ability to fix your car in real time. So the driver who we've always had here has also been a semi-mechanic. He could do enough to get us to the next town or to the next place, if necessary, to our destination, hopefully, if necessary. But of course, you would need to take it to a proper mechanic to fix it. So Tim Black has an interesting point. He says, Africa seems to make it easier for Europeans and Asians to open business than they do to melanated people. I don't think that that's the case, actually, to be honest with you. here's something that I think is really important to know. And I can't say that for everywhere. I will respectfully disagree. Here's why I'll say this. Number one, people who grow up in a country are generally more complacent. Americans will say Mexicans, Africans, Arabs, Asians are taking our jobs. All these immigrants are taking our jobs. They're taking our benefits. They're taking this. Okay, it's important to understand that when you are moving to a new country, generally you will do a lot of research before you move to that country. You're going to do research like this. You're going to do research on their laws. You're going to have to learn how to get a driver's license. You're going to learn how to get a business license. You're going to learn to pay how you pay your taxes. You're going to learn all these things, and then you're going to apply those things more in general when you start a business. So, like, I think about all the people who ran all those corner stores in Brooklyn. That one family that now owns 4 corner stores within a 4-block radius. And I remember when they only had one in 2004 when I moved into that apartment. Now 20 years later, they own 4 corner stores, right? They came ultra poor. They pooled their money together. They rented out that space for that one little corner store they had, which is a tiny little space. And then they expanded slowly but surely. They lived together as a family, like 4 brothers and their wives all lived in an apartment together, and they built, right? But they also looked into every single thing available to them by the United States government. Every grant available, every loan available, anything that was available to them, they looked into. Do you know who doesn't do that? Many Americans. Many of the people who complain about, and I'm using America as the metaphor here because I think it's important, it applies here too. Many Americans will complain about immigrants coming in and taking all these things from them, but they're just doing the things that are available to them. They just don't look at it. Now, are there specific programs for immigrants? Yes, there are in America. Yes, there are. They are not to the same that I think the disingenuous people who report on the news, though, will speak about them. And that's a conversation for another time on another topic, because there's some stuff about, immigrants getting housing and complaining about the housing in New York and Mayor Adams and all this other stuff. That's a conversation for another time. But in particular, I think it's important to understand that people here in these countries, all countries, if you're multiple generations in that country, you become complacent. You expect the government is supposed to give things to you, right? I also find people who live here don't pay all their taxes, don't set up bank accounts, don't do all the things that those immigrants who come here do. Also, people don't share the little tricks of the trade and things that you can do to make your life a little bit easier. They do with each other. So I think before we start saying these countries make it easier for other people, I think we also need to think about how those other people enter these countries, right? Now, one thing that'll make it easier for you in any country to do anything is having an influx of cash. Whether that means paying commissions, side deals with government officials, with whatever country you're talking about, or that means just making your life easier, being able to come in and rent a space. Having money beforehand helps. And a lot of times immigrants save up to move to a new country where people living in those countries aren't always saving up. So, I hear a lot of complaints about a lot of people saying the government won't do this for us, but they do this for them. And then I sit down with these people and I talk to them a lot. I've done interviews with people and I ask people about their back end. I heard somebody complaining about one of these water companies and saying like, oh, because they're Lebanese, they get all these different things. How come they get grants and they're a big company? Well, because they qualified for the grant and they did everything that they needed to do. In fact, above and beyond, right? They had an employee handbook. I know that sounds trivial to most of you, but many other companies that applied for the grant did not have an employee handbook. They paid their taxes every year on the year. They paid all their import fees. They paid every single fee they were supposed to pay, every fee. And then they also pay other fees that they have to pay, right? They followed every particular protocol required. No stone went unturned. So when it came time to apply for it, the government's looking at them and saying, do they deserve a grant? Yes. They check all the boxes and some. Does this company deserve a grant? No, because they checked 2 of the 10 boxes. So many people here will complain that they don't get the same thing as these other people get, but they also don't have the same things that those other people have. Finances and the willingness to do the research to get all of the things in place that you need to have. Now, sometimes is there self-discrimination? Yes. I'm not going to say that this country or any country is completely devoid of that. It just happens from time to time. I don't know why, it just does. And especially on the continent of Africa, you will find that people will look at other cultures as superior to their own. It happens a lot on the continent. I've seen it many times. But I do think it's important to understand that many people who live in a country that are multiple generations in become complacent and hate immigrants, because immigrants come and advance. They're upwardly mobile. Immigrants generally are upwardly mobile in a lot of different countries, especially Nigerians. Nigerians are the most upwardly mobile immigrant class in any country they go to, right? And so that's why many people hate Nigerians, including other West Africans. That's another conversation for another time. Okay, so Mark Hansen said, I like the generator idea, going back to his business. Okay, so Tato said, I was in Abidjan 3 weeks ago, construction everywhere. Yeah, everything's under construction, so that's definitely a business to do. Liz Z said, are you living on your property yet? I haven't tuned in for a while. Yes, Liz Z, I am. Since October of 2023, I have been living in the guest house. It has not been without its challenges, which are, vlogs are coming soon, middle of the year, summertime vlogs. You'll get all the vlogs about moving here. There's a lot. There's a lot to unpack and to talk about, literally and figuratively speaking. But yeah, I mean, look, it's been a journey, a long journey, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys. But that's coming later. Tim Black says, I see Indians, Chinese, and Arabs killing it in Africa. Yeah, so a couple different reasons. One, they communicate with each other and tell each other what works, what doesn't work, what you should do, which is what I'm trying to do here. One of the reasons for me pushing investing on the continent of Africa so much in real estate and in businesses and building your own businesses here is because they've been doing this outside of internet platforms, just in communicating in their own circles for the last 100 years. And across the different countries that we're talking about here. Yeah, I mean, Chinese, I would say Asians in general. There's some Filipinos here in Sierra Leone that have done well for themselves. There are many Chinese, of course, because they've figured out how to do business across the entire continent. There are many Arab folks, depending on the country. You do have Indians as well that are doing well. Yeah, so these things are all true. Many of these people are coming from countries that are overcrowded, coming from countries that have similar circumstances, but have further developed in certain areas. And so they're just applying what they've learned there and bringing it here. So like Chinese manufacturing has been big for a really long time, right? Since the mid 90s or before the 90s, even the 80s, American jobs have been outsourced to China and Taiwan for a minute, right? You open up a shirt from Express and it says made in Taiwan or made in China, right? Look underneath something that you buy in Times Square, it says made in China. I can't say they've saturated the market, but there's already many people doing that there. So what have they done? They started bringing manufacturing to the continent of Africa and doing fast fashion in Africa, because you have a lot of people with strong dexterity in their fingertips. So you have a lot of women in these factories doing fast fashion. So your H&Ms and all these different kind of clothing brands, a lot of times are manufactured on the continent of Africa, and also the clothing is dumped later on the continent of Africa. It's like a vicious cycle of underpaid wages, underpaid employees, and underemployed employees, and then also waste sites for those people. So yeah, I think is agreeing with me, saying I don't think this is the case. Some just seem to persevere more despite the setbacks. And on the other hand, some of our folks, especially those new to the continent, expect things to be exactly the same. So yeah, and I think that's much of what I said there, but I think you added the fact that some people that are new to the continent expect to just come in here and it'd be smooth, right? I think Ya also said, as these countries, as the countries they are used to, then they get frustrated when they're not. Yeah, so they expect some things to be the same as the countries they're used to. Yeah. So so that's important. So we talked a little bit about career, and then we went into entrepreneurship. So let's talk about entrepreneurships, and then we'll get into the personal element last. Then, since people are joining late, that's probably the most interesting piece. So we'll get into the personal piece last. So on the entrepreneurship front, businesses that are really quickly. So Liz is just replying to what I'm saying. I'm going to reply to some comments that were from the previous discussion before I get into entrepreneurship. That's great. No more rent. Correct. I no longer pay rent on the continent of Africa. That's done for now. I may pay rent to do Airbnbs later. That's a business expense, and we'll talk. That's a business that I'm launching soon. So I'm Tuber. iTuber12 says I'm late. What up though? What's up? Welcome to the live stream. Mossy Main, who by the way was on the stream earlier. So shout out to you joining your second live stream today. Are these groups coming with capital or getting grants from Africa? Most of them are coming with capital and then sometimes applying from grants. I feel like people need to form investment groups instead of trying to do everything alone. Correct, 100%. That's something that I was attempting to do, but I realized that I can't wear so many hats at once. I need to focus on one or two things, and then eventually I'll help put investment groups together. But it's just not the time for me to work on that at this very moment. Mark Hansen says, the truth is, unfortunately, our African-American culture is set back by us not working together in unity, as well as getting frustrated too quickly. Well, we are disparate groups in the United States, right? The concept of not all kinfolk is skinfolk, not all skinfolk is kinfolk. There are also people who hate each other because they're on opposite sides of the political spectrum. There are also other minority groups within the Black American diaspora, or Black Americans. And so that makes it difficult to work together. Whereas other countries generally, even though they may be from different tribes within that country, if they're from the same country or geographical region, when they move to a new place, they tend to all work together. They have systems and networks and groups that pull each other along. A lot of the time that's through a common religion. You know, a lot of times religious values help you want to work with your fellow brothers and sisters. A lot of times it's just the family values and the family culture values. America in general is about rugged individualism. So if you're a Black American and you're moving up the socioeconomic ladder, you know, many times it's been a lot of what you've heard, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And so it hasn't always been pulling people along. It's been trying to get as fast and as far as I can, and then see who's up, look up and see who's around and see if we can work together. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that is just what it is. And so if that's the case, then of course you're not going to have a lot of people working together to build. Now you have Pan-African movements, you have different political parties, you have different people working together, you have platforms like this where we're trying to get people to work together. But you can imagine that if that's the stance that you come from already, you're not going to have a lot of cooperation when moving to a new country, completely different from the culture you're used to. Mark Hansen also adds, I've seen a lot of YouTubers who have moved to the continent of Africa and gave up too quickly because things are so difficult there. Like Joe said, a lot of people started with little to nothing, but grow it. Yes. Then iTuber says, it's up to us to change this, Mark, find like-minded people and get going. So real quick, what did I miss? Non-Sierra Leonean business people got a grant or something? Yeah, sometimes they do. Yes. Like Lebanese specifically is what I was talking about. And people had complained about it. And so I was just explaining that. But definitely go back and watch, because we talked about jobs and because this whole live is about what I feel about Africa, right? And what my experience has been so far. And so the first part was talking about jobs. The second part is talking about entrepreneurship, where we are right now. And then the third element to this will be talking about personal, or, you know, just, you know, I guess personal. I think that's what I said originally. And then I think Mark Hansen agrees with iTuber. iTuber says, I missed many lives in a row. Who's your new partner? So I actually go, so I go live now 3 times a week. for those of you who are just tuning in, and I will get back to the topic, just want to answer this because I think this is important, because since many of you are on, it's good for you guys to know this. I'll be going live 3 times a week. So I don't know which partner you're talking about, but I go live with Admire Demo from Sierra Leone's Killing It, where we talk about things specific to Sierra Leone, because many of you, especially on YouTube, are interested in Sierra Leone. And the problem with focusing so much on Sierra Leone with this particular live is that there are many people who are disinterested with specifically Sierra Leone. And so I have to try to speak about things that are broader context, because this is authentic African, not authentic Sierra Leone, right? So I go live with her. We talked about Kush. We'll be talking about Kush more, not cannabis, but something else. And we're going to have a conversation about that on Wednesday. So we normally go live on Mondays, but we're going live on Wednesday. So I don't know if you're talking about Admire, but that's maybe who you're talking about. She is in a committed relationship and lives with her partner. So no, she would not be Mrs. Satagwa. Okay, now, if you're talking about African Stream, that is Inem Richardson. She is a American-born African of Nigerian descent. She is now living in Burkina Faso. She is a co-founder of the Thomas Sankara Institute. She's a Pan-Africanist and is a journalist for Africa Stream. And so you guys might remember I started doing content with Africa Stream, where they started doing collaborations with me on Instagram. I spoke to the CEO. His name is Ahmed. Actually, he's based in Kenya. And he and I talked about going live once a week with a journalist. And Inem was the perfect fit because she's so knowledgeable. She has a wealth of knowledge. And she is someone formerly living in America who now lives in Burkina Faso and really is focused on Pan-Africanism. So she has that dual understanding, right? And so it's really important to have someone like her speak to a lot of these stories, because our focus is on Pan-Africanism. I do not know what her her marital status or relationship status is. That's none of my business, because it's a specifically professional relationship. So I will leave that to that. And if you watch the live, you'll see that. Like, it's a strictly professional relationship, authentic African and African Stream coming together in a capacity for her job and what she does in her, her day job as a journalist. And for me, as someone passionate about this, collaborating with that organization. So Dan Diablo says, African Americans in Ghana tend to attribute the success of the Lebanese, Chinese, etc., primarily due to the backing of their respective countries. Thoughts? Not the backing of their respective countries, but backing of their respective country people. I've seen in many cases, not only families, but groups of people get together and invest in a particular individual, and that individual pays them back with interest. And so you have that a lot of times where people pool their money together and they go far and then pay that money back. And so it's a collective commerce, and the way they do it actually works a lot. And so I've seen it with the Lebanese community. I've seen it with the Indian community. I've seen it with the Chinese community here on the continent. And then I've also seen people who've decided to move here, people who've already been successful or have financial success, I should say, in their respective countries, then move to the continent of Africa, apply their knowledge and their wealth, and grow businesses here. The other thing to keep in mind too is they do a really good job of supporting their own businesses as well. So like if you think about all the Chinatowns in the United States, as far as I know, there's San Francisco, LA, Chicago, New York, and there probably are many others that I don't know about. In those Chinatowns, you have Black Americans going in there for some Chinese food. You have white Americans. You have Chinese going there and operating mostly there. They don't need to buy anywhere else. You do not see a lot of that from our groups when we come here. And a lot of times it's because a lot of people don't maintain the level of standard that they do for themselves or that you would expect elsewhere. They lower their standard because they see sometimes the standard around them can be lowered and they don't have to do as much. What I found with some of these other ethnic groups that move to the continent of Africa is that they keep a quality of standard that if they were a patron, they would want for that business. And they support each other's businesses, mainly strictly go to only those businesses. And for an example, here's a good example of what that might look like. I met with a company that was run by two Lebanese women, and I interviewed them. And two things came out of that interview. And I know people have gotten upset with me when I've talked about this previously, but I don't care. One, they gave me 3 other interviews to do because they saw it as beneficial for other companies. Now, they're all Lebanese-run companies, but they saw it as beneficial for them to promote their businesses on the platform. Even though the platform was much smaller than it is now. I think I had 50,000 followers on Instagram at the time of those meetings, and I had about 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. So now we're inching up on 300,000 followers on Instagram. And so now, of course, people are far more likely to be like, yeah, introduce you to this person, that person. I'd love to do the interview, whatever. Now people are asking for interviews. But back then, those people were excited to have an interview with the platform because first of all, they watched the content beforehand. They said, you know what, I want to come with my best to this platform. And then they offered other people to interview. Number one and number 2. Number 3, they also offered some form of compensation. The only people who offered a form of compensation for the interviews that I've done with them were non-Sierra Leoneans. Let me repeat. The only people who found it valuable to offer some other form of compensation were the non-Sierra Leoneans, the people that I interviewed, or people who were ethnically not Sierra Leonean. They may have been born here, but they're not Sierra Leonean. People wanted to pay me, and I said, no, I'm doing this because I care about what we're doing here. So I got free things from those businesses. I got free hotel stays for a couple of days. I got like 75% off hotel stays for extended period of time. I got free massages. I've gotten all kinds of different things from people who I've interviewed. And it wasn't something that I requested. They just were so happy to have been a part of this process that I reached out to them for the interviews that they offered something. Now, do our folks know to do things like that? Maybe not. And so that's why I have these conversations like this, because I'm not going to say that they didn't do it because they didn't feel I was valuable enough to do it. They just may not have known better that it's something that helps. Now, it doesn't mean I promote any one more than the other, because the idea wasn't to promote people's businesses based on what I can get from it. The idea was to meet people, to build a network, but also to share their stories with other people. But you do those kinds of things and you get passionate replies like this, right? So, okay, there's a lot. iTuber, I cannot continue to answer those questions. I know I may have also answered those before. I appreciate the questions, but no, I can't answer those questions. So Cash says, I just joined. It's been a while. Glad you were able to catch. Glad I was able to catch the live today. Glad to see where your channel is now. I started following YouTube from your Vanessa Canby interview. Wow. Sorry, guys. Okay, here we go. So that's interesting. So I did the Vanessa Canby interview in March of 2021. Back then, and so we interviewed about my move to Ghana and my move to the continent. And that was a great interview because it did bring a bunch of people to the channel. I think I went from 600 subscribers at that point in time. Mind you, we're like 14,000 subscribers now. I was at 600 subscribers. I think I went from 600 to like 900 subscribers in like. So that was huge. And I think you're one of those people. So I thank you for coming along on this journey this far with me from that time, because that was an incredible journey. And I would tell you, Vanessa gave me some good advice. She told me to go live once a week, no matter what other content you have, definitely go live. And I followed that advice every single week since then. iTuber says they work together well. We all try to do the same business idea separately and compete with each other until we all go out of business, whereas they specialize and don't compete in the same spaces. That is true to some degree, in many degrees, actually. That's very true. I think a lot of times what you find is that because we don't communicate with each other enough, we all find the same problems, and then we all try to solve those same problems instead of partnering with each other. You cannot run a business alone here on the continent. You cannot. Well, anybody can do anything. Let me not say that. But the large majority of people will not be able to run a business on their own on the continent. Even in the States, right? Many of the biggest tech companies and businesses that you know, there was a technical mind and there was a business mind. Even with Facebook, although Eduardo Salvin was kicked out later, he was the finance, he was the business mind, he was the one trying to get them to do advertising early on. You had Zuckerberg and you had Dustin, who were programmers who didn't know anything about anything else, right? And so they're just like on their computers programming away. And Eduardo Salvin comes in and says, we should meet with investors, all that kind of stuff. And then later, of course, they met Sean Parker, and that just kind of changed everything. But my point is, every company that is successful usually has partners. And if you are going to come to the continent and you want to build a big business, you are going to need to have partners, whether they have a different domain expertise than you do, or they have finances that you don't have, or they have a network that you don't have, or they have a local context that you don't have, whatever that might look like. They need to have something that you don't have so that you guys can complement each other. You don't want to have redundant experience unless you want to bring in another partner that doesn't, right? Because obviously the two of you can bounce ideas off each other and run fast together. But if you don't have the stuff that you guys are missing, you're going to run fast into a brick wall, right? And so it is important that you work together with folks who fill the gaps that you don't have. That's going to be really important. I think I spent a long enough time on entrepreneurship. Do you guys have any other questions before I move on to the personal? Sorry, I have to stay hydrated. I've been talking a lot today, so hydration is key. All right. We'll come back to any questions if any questions or comments come along. And I keep neglecting Instagram. Let me, and then I'll come back to Daughter of Maria and Miss S. Let's see. Vix of Pick says, West Africans hate Nigerians so much. I had no idea. Let's talk about it. Yikes. So glad I tuned in. This is an interesting topic. Hey, okay, that's Vix of Picks. Okay. What is Alchemy said? I just subscribed. This is dope. Thank you. Appreciate you subscribing. What is Alchemy? So we'll talk about the Nigerian piece a little bit really quickly. I think there are two elements to what's happening with Nigerians in other parts of West Africa. And okay, the same things that make Nigeria or countries like India so advanced in terms of what they can do in other places are the same things that make people hate them for some good reasons and some bad reasons. So if you have a top 5 IQ in the world, that is going to breed some kind of jealousy. It just is, right? And that's just what it is, right? If you're known to be the fastest growing immigrant class in any country you go to, doctors, lawyers, right? Engineers, right? These folks tend to make a lot of money. And no matter which tribe you're from, even if you're Hausa, if you're Yoruba, if you're Igbo, or any one of the other 200 ethnic groups in Nigeria, when you go to another country and you're making more money, you are flashy. Even if you're first generation American, I know some very flashy Nigerians. That can breed jealousy. They apply some of that same stuff in other West African countries. So jealousy is one of the reasons, and I would say one of the main reasons why people dislike Nigerians. They don't do themselves any favors by being so boisterous and flamboyant and, showing off, so I would say that. The other thing, though, is not all Nigerians or Indians. I also use Indians as an example too, because India is in an interesting place because a lot of the similar dichotomies with the ultra wealthy, ultra poor, but really, really, really smart people kind of in the middle and up, Really, really smart people, smarter than the average people you find anywhere else in the world. Nigeria also has that. India also has that. What they also both have is the high propensity for scamming. I just have to be honest. So now, is that for the entire country? Is that the majority of the countries? No. But the ones that are good at it are going to be the best at it and the best at not getting caught because they're already smarter than most people in the world. The reason why they're known for that is because they're smarter than most people. They just are. So they're able to get a lot of people. So when you hear about Yahoo Boys, 419, etc., these scams that you hear coming out of Nigeria, there are also similar scams that come out of India as well. And I like to use India as an example because Nigerians are going to go crazy on me when I say scamming, when I say Nigeria, but it's just true. And so I also like to just throw in another country like India because India is also in the same boat. So, you know, you can think about this, right? There are call centers, whole call centers, like an entire floor dedicated to just scamming people in a business that might be legitimate. So like floor. Second before I come back. All right, so floor 3 is a scam, all scam floor. Floor 4 is a legitimate business. Floor 1 and 2 are legitimate businesses, right? Outcalling, customer service, outsourced customer service, right, for U.S. based companies. Which is using remote access to get to people's computers. All right, guys, I'm really sorry about that. Shout out to Africell. I'm gonna call Africell out on this. Africell, what's going on? What's going on? Sorry about that. So look, that happens. Frustrations of living on the continent, right? That's just gonna happen. Or specifically here. Okay. So as I was saying, you know, you have floors dedicated to these kinds of scams. So I use India as the example. Now you have this in Nigeria as well. And, you know, then you have some of that same criminal activity, you know, working its way, permeating its way into other countries. Yeah, into other countries. And so people are seeing that and they're not paying attention to the own crime that already happens in their country and the scamming that already happens in their country that their people do. They just only look at the immigrants that are doing it. Just like, doesn't that sound familiar? Like in America, when they're like, you know, the Mexicans are coming here and they're committing so much crime when most violent crime happens between people who already know each other. Most felonies happen within neighborhoods of people who already know each other. Most of the crime happening in the United States is happening with Americans to Americans. But it's easier to blame the foreigner on the issues that you're having in your country than to look within, right? This is how people are. So I use the United States as an example. I will use other West Africans as that example about Nigerians. Now, different countries have their different specific reasons, but that's the general sentiment that I will see. You also do have some very arrogant Nigerians. I heard one guy one time say something to the effect that, you know, he had met a guy that was so smart, and he looked at the guy and said, "There's no way you can be Nigerian. I mean, there's no way you can be Ghanaian. You're so smart. There's no way you can be Ghanaian." And the guy was like, "Oh no, no, I've been living in Ghana, but I'm Nigerian." He's like, the world has been set back. Sorry, he said, what did he say? The world has been set back on its proper course or something like that. You know, these parables that Nigerians speak in. And because in his mind, he was like, you cannot be that smart unless you're from our country. And so you do have folks who say things like that, but then also can cause some challenges with other people who look at you. So yes, there is some hate on the Nigerians, mostly not for good reason, but in some cases you can see why some people might be upset. All right. Okay. So Miss S said it came to the live lays. But I wanted to add that a lot of times African Americans want instant results or instant gratification, but success dictates coming with pioneering mind and spirit. Correct. I agree. Miss S says you are going through a lot of the same things on the continent, but with patience, you will get the things you've always wanted, no matter what that is, a successful business or a dream home. Agreed 100%. It just takes time, right? I mean, anything worth having does not come easy and does take time. You know, one person that I disagree with 90% of the time, but the 10% of the time that I agree with him is why I listen to him. I won't shout him out on this platform, but one thing he said like 3 or 4 months ago, and I heard him say it, and it really, really took me by surprise, but it was also something that I take with me every day. He said, beware of ambitious, lazy people, right? And that might sound counterintuitive. Ambitious, lazy. How can you be both? There are a lot of people who are interested but not committed, meaning they're ambitious, right? They really want the thing, but they're not committed to the process or the work that requires. And they're looking for shortcuts. And because people want instant gratification, it's the world we live in, but just in general, people want instant gratifications. They are willing to cut corners. They are willing to take part in illegal activities. They're willing to do things that could be detrimental to others, like selling drugs that kill people, like Kush, for instance, in Sierra Leone and other parts of West Africa, in order to move ahead and succeed. And so take that with you guys. Beware of ambitious, lazy people. And you will find many of those living on the continent. So beware of those folks, for sure. All right. So now we've talked a lot about career. We've talked about now let's get to the personal piece. And I'm going to make this part shorter because we're already an hour, 17 minutes in. But Daughter of Marie has something to say. Let me get to what Daughter Marie said. Ambitious, lazy people are willing to build it on a workaholic's back. They are willing to find someone to commit and then take the credit for that person's efforts. Yeah, exactly. And there are many other iterations of the things that ambitious, lazy people will do. But just please tell me my connection is going to come back. Okay, we're back. All right. So Four Bang says, hello and thank you for the love of Mama Africa. Of course, thank you for following the platform. I appreciate it. Anybody else on IG offering any insights? Let's see. All right, cool. I think we're good on IG. Let's go back to the tube. Your tube, in fact. All right, cool. So on a personal front, I think it's really, really important to remember that in many cases, you're moving to a country where many people want to escape where they are and go to where you came from, right? And so the way you'll be treated in many ways is going to be based on that. Not always, not every time. some people are just genuine people, just like anywhere. There are going to be some good, genuine people. You're going to have anywhere where there's poverty, you're going to have a high percentage of potential crime or even petty crime, right? May not be violent crime, but they're going to just be people that are going to try to take advantage. There just are, because they're going to want to have one leg up on you or just one leg up, period, especially because you came from the country they're trying to escape to. They're going to presume that you're coming with money and that you are financially more well off than they are. So you're not going to miss that, whatever it is that they stole from you or whatever it is that they overcharged you for because you came from another place that they would like to go to. Friendships also work in that same way. In some ways, you'll find people who want to be your friend because you came from another country. You may find people who want to be in a relationship with you because you come from another country. Because many people know you line now. Okay, here. Are we back? Looks like we're back. All right, I may have to cut this short, guys, because it's looking like the connection's really not trying to be stable. And but I'll just leave it on that note, right? Is that you just have to keep that in mind. And so, as you get older, you get better at filtering friends anyway. Just always keep that in mind. I don't think you should test people because a lot of people fail tests even because they don't know they're taking a test. Number one. But also, I think it's just important to just be good at discerning who it is that you want in your inner circle, right? Just remember, you're the combined average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? So you should build your friendships based on that. People are either making deposits or withdrawals. So if somebody's constantly making withdrawals from you and draining you, that's probably not the kind of person you want to spend too much time with, regardless of where you are. But on the continent, I think that's especially important. And in the dating world, I think that's also important as well. I think the other 2 topics are far more important than on the dating front. We'll have plenty of content on the Patreon for the dating. If you want to see more of that, that's coming soon. It's going to just be patreon.com/AuthenticAfrican. So we'll have all the content on dating if you want to have those conversations. But we won't be doing it on this platform. I'm not getting into my personal life anymore on this platform. I'll be doing that on that platform behind the paywall. $10 a month. Get all the dating, the good, the bad, the ugly, the salacious, the whatever, all kinds of stuff you'll get there. And then I'm also planning on doing a separately from my own personal life, but just another thing that I think is really important, which I'm going to be calling Authentic African After Dark. And I think that will probably be on OnlyFans, where we talk to people who are in different lines of work that are deemed illegal, but operate successfully within these countries. And so you guys can stay tuned to that as well. Those will probably be on OnlyFans, just because that platform seems to be more aligned with that kind of content. So you guys stay tuned to the platform. I'll be making those announcements when the time comes, but there'll be different kinds of interviews and different kinds of content and vlogs and stuff that we do in that space that I just cannot do on YouTube or any of the other platforms that we're on. So with that, guys, I want to thank you for watching. If you found this interesting, please follow anybody you know who's planning to visit, move, or is interested in anything on the continent. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, hit that thumbs up. And also, if you need a consulting call, just click on one of the links in the description. You'll find out the consulting calls in the description. It's all there. And then also, if you're watching on, let's say, Instagram, the link is in my bio. So with that, guys, thanks for watching. I will see you all on the next live.